Greetings, and welcome to A Year of Movies, a Planet Geek production. For this project, we are using the Ivan Walters reference book of 365 films to watch on the day they happened. Each day, we watch a movie associated with the date we are watching it on. And as it is the 5th of March, we'll be watching Judgement at Nuremberg from 1961, directed by Stanley Kramer and starring Spencer Tracy. So to begin with, again, we're dealing with real-world situation, a moment in history and whatnot, in recent history, technically. And we are dealing with a story that I'm aware of but have actually never seen. The cast itself is known to me, and I do know about this movie to begin with, but this is my first time watching it. That being said, this movie does star Spencer Tracy, but it also stars Burt Lancaster, Richard Widmark, Marlene Dietrich, Maximilian Schell, Judy Garland, and Montgomery Clift. So to start off with, it's kind of cool to see like two Judy Garland movies back to back, completely different types of movies especially. And one of the other things that was surprising to see that I didn't look into any more of the cast than what is on the in the opening credits, really soon into the movie, a very familiar voice, and William Shatner has a pre-Star Trek role that I didn't realize that he was in. I was aware of stuff that he'd done prior to Star Trek, but it was a surprise to see him in this particular movie. So it centers around the story of Judge Dan Haywood, who is Spencer Tracy, being brought in for the trials for the crimes against humanity for these former Nazis. This movie dealing with stuff that happened in 1947. I found myself like riveted to it. The movie is black and white, but that adds so much to the texture of this movie, where we're dealing with, first of all, very fantastic actors from the top to the bottom. It's just a pleasure to watch. The camera work inside this courtroom drama mainly is so beautifully technically done. Everyone is so wonderfully captured in the moment of just dramatic speeches and monologues. The movie starts off in a perfect way of how we're dealing with a translation between the two languages, and we at one point see the interpreters interpreting, and the people have headphones on to listen to the interpreter going both ways. But at a step into the movie, it suddenly switches so that we no longer have to keep referring back to the actual interpreters. The actors then all start speaking English. Those that don't speak English are still listening to their headphones when interacting with the other German speaking characters. And it's just so smoothly done. And again, it's not like all of a sudden they can hear word for word and all that sort of thing. There's still this, they put in this pause slightly to show that they're still just waiting for a slight translation. And it's so beautifully handled. And again, seeing these fantastic actors, Burt Lancaster looks a little off with the old age makeup they have on him to age his character up. But again, it's just so spectacularly done, and it's just a treat to have watched. Mind you, I mean, we're not talking about a simple matter that this movie is covering, but it's still a very dramatic, very strongly acted movie. So the opening statements of the actual trial happen on March 5th, 1947, and that's about 12 minutes into this 3-hour and 6-minute movie. I was so engrossed with this movie, I didn't even realize that 3 hours had actually gone by. I mean, I knew 3 hours went by, but it didn't feel like it, and that's how engrossing this movie really is. And that year at the Academy Awards, it went on to actually win a couple of awards and got quite a few nominations. It won for Best Actor for Maximilian Schell and Best Adapted Screenplay, and it was nominated for Best Actor for Spencer Tracy, Best Supporting Actor, Montgomery Clift, Best Supporting Actress, Judy Garland, Best Art Direction, Black and White, Best Cinematography, Black and White, Best Costume Design, Black and White, Best Director, Best Film Lighting, and Best Picture. And as it is the 6th of March, we are going to be watching The Accused from 1988, directed by Jonathan Kaplan and starring Kelly McGillis. Now, to begin with, this is a movie that I did see originally back in the day, probably on one of the the Super Channel that we had at the time. It was more than likely the place where, because I don't think I would have went out on my own to rent this actual copy of this movie. Well aware of both Kelly McGillis and Jodie Foster in this at this point, and this isn't the first time that I've seen this movie, but this is probably the second time I've seen this movie. Well, I've already mentioned that the movie does star Kelly McGillis and Jodie Foster, but it also stars Bernie Colson, Leo Rossi, Anne Hearn, Carmen Argenziano, Steve Anton, and Tom O'Brien. Now, the fact that this movie is based on true events, it's a very difficult movie to watch, just because of the subject matter alone and how well acted this movie is. Jodie Foster as the victim of this assault by an unwarranted assault by these men, and the crowd that basically ended up encouraging the assault while it was happening was just, first of all, a difficult thing to watch, especially in '88. Seeing this on the well, obviously I did not see this on the big screen. It was definitely something I saw on television at home, but still very uncomfortable situation to be watching. And again, Kelly McGillis does a fantastic job, and it's a very dramatically drawn out movie for a very controversial decision that actually happened, and then how it got overturned and became a bigger issue, and wonderfully acted by these two lead actresses that are at the top of their game at this point in the late 80s. I mean, there's not much more to say about this movie than how, again, unsettling the subject matter is, and the fact that it is based on a true event is even more harrowing. To date, probably the most difficult watch of this project. To begin with, the actual assault itself happens at the very beginning of the movie, right at the very beginning, 30 seconds into this movie, on March 6th, 1983. And in this hour and 51-minute movie, we then actually revisit the events of that day through flashback at an hour and 20 minutes into the movie. So we get a double dose of this situation. And when it comes to the Academy Awards for that particular year, it ended up winning Best Actress for Jodie Foster. And as it is the 7th of March, we are going to be watching The Bridge at Remagen from 1969, directed by John Guillermin and starring George Segal. So I guess when it comes to doing movies that take place on particular dates and all that sort of thing, you're going to run into not only a lot of biopics, but you're going to run into a lot of actual war movies, and this is no exception. We are in World War II for this particular movie, and to be honest, I don't know if I can remember. I definitely haven't seen the movie, but I'm not 100% sure if I knew about it. I know about the story. I know about the event itself, which actually might be just hearing from other things throughout history, or I might have heard a podcast a little while ago that talked about this event in its reality, not the cinematic version that I saw. So like I said, the movie does star George Segal, as well as Robert Vaughn, Ben Gazzara, Bradford Dillman, E.G. Marshall, Peter Van Eyck, Hans Christian Blech, and Bob Hopkins. So it's kind of interesting to see how they put this movie together. It basically, you're witnessing the same event from two different points of angle. You're dealing it from the U.S. troops and the German troops, how they converge onto this one situation. This particular situation has a great mass of German forces being stuck on one side of this giant river, so basically isolated from being able to escape from this almost enclosed island by a single bridge, that the German forces are telling them to destroy the bridge so that the Allied forces can't come in to attack them, or just to save off the German forces. And that's where the main bulk of this movie is both forces arriving at the same situation. Now, of the war movies, I've seen quite a bit, but this one seems to be the most gunfire going on. There is a huge amount of, it is death because it is war, but it definitely is shown a lot differently than another. We have a lot of theatrical looking deaths. We have guys doing the whole entire grabbing their guts and spinning around and falling onto the ground, and over the top sort of deaths. But nonetheless, it's still very entertaining. But again, it's a lot of gunplay in this movie, and there's a lot of really, really good practical effects. We actually have two sides of this river lined with heavy artillery and tanks just launching fire at either side and things blowing up and all that sort of thing. So a lot of really cool practical effects of detonations and explosions and whatnot, and a lot of like full-scale vehicles, like full-size tanks being used in this particular thing. Really cool to see a movie of this big scope using such practical effects. Even the actual detonation of the bridge at Remagen is a spectacular pyrotechnic event, which is kind of cool. And it's also interesting to see how they have the opposing sides almost mirroring each other. Like there's a little bit of dissension in the ranks, as the people in charge aren't really kind of backed up too much by their own men at certain points. But then after tragedy happens and whatnot, how things start to fall apart and how things run through the rest of the course of basically the rest of World War II. So the American forces actually do advance onto the bridge at Remagen on March 7th, 1945, which is about 40 minutes into this 1 hour and 55-minute movie. And as this is the 8th of March, we are going to be watching a love story from 1970, directed by Arthur Hiller and starring Ali MacGraw. So to begin with, this is one of those, whether you've seen it or not, you know the actual story of this movie. It's kind of hard to avoid it. If you've grown up in a certain era frame, basically 70s, 80s, 90s, more than likely you know about the story. Anything beyond, you've probably heard about this story, whether or not it's in reference to any of the actors involved with this movie. However, this is actually the first time I've actually seen this movie in its entirety. I do know that I have seen bits and pieces of it on television, flipping through channels and all that sort of thing, but I've never actually sat down and watched the entire movie. So that being said, not only is this movie starring Ali MacGraw, but it also stars Ryan O'Neal, John Marley, Ray Milland, Russell Knight, Catherine Belford, and Tommy Lee Jones. So to begin with, the movie starts off with a basically, spoiler, this is how this story is going to go. But again, if you weren't on like first viewing with this movie when it originally came out, it was probably a bit of a shocker to hear the opening and all that sort of thing. But knowing how this movie goes, we deal with the spoiler at the very beginning. It's basically what it is. It's a love story between these two people as we see vignettes of their life. We don't follow like a full drawn out storyline. Technically we do, but we see it in bits and pieces, in, like I said, small vignettes as we go through the relationship and how their lives interact with each other. From their early college days up until basically the unfortunate end. And it's a very beautifully told story that has been repeated since then and even prior to in different storylines and all that. But this particular storyline has been echoed in other versions of this movie. And initially, we're just dealing with Ali MacGraw and Ryan O'Neal as obviously the mainstays of the story, and everyone basically comes in and out of the story at different points. So our interests are involved with these two people, and it's very, I keep wanting to use the word love in this description, but you can't help know that these two definitely deal with this relationship that goes through highs and lows and is a wonderful treat to have witnessed. Now an early point in this movie, about 8 or 9 minutes into the movie, we actually have Ali MacGraw's character staying in Boston on March 8th, 1969 to watch Ryan O'Neal perform during a hockey game that he's involved with. And that would be, like I said, at about 9 minutes into this hour and 39-minute movie. So during that year's Academy Awards, it did win for Best Original Score, as well as being nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, Best Actor for Ryan O'Neal, Best Actress for Ali MacGraw, and Best Supporting Actor for John Marley. And as it is the 9th of March, we are going to be watching Goodnight and Good Luck from 2005, directed by George Clooney and starring David Strathairn. So, to begin with, I am aware of this era in network history, television, the news cycle, and how it was dealing with the quote-unquote Red Scare of the era, and how it directly affected both not only Hollywood itself, but the actual news industry at the time dealing with this particular subject matter. And as it turns out, this is my first viewing of this movie, even though I am well aware of this movie and the stage production. However, until I started watching, I did not realize that this movie was from the year 2005. I thought it was a much sooner movie than that. And like I said, while the movie does star David Strathairn, it also stars George Clooney, Robert Downey Jr., Patricia Clarkson, Frank Langella, Jeff Daniels, and Tate Donovan. So we're dealing with a time in television history where in the 1950s, in particular for this particular storyline, that the CBS employees were required to make a loyalty oath. At the present time, we were dealing with basically a news organization that was actually investigating the news instead of just being mouthpieces, just like regurgitating what was out there. They actually made investigative journalism part of their oath to bring across whatever truths were out there for the general public. During such a situation, Ed Murrow, who is portrayed by David Strathairn in this movie, comes across the story of Milo Wanderlovich, a member of the Air Force, who's being forced out because of his family's political views. During the trial, such information was withheld from the actual proceedings, and this is what spikes the interest of Murrow and his crew to proceed further with this investigation. As a result of that, Senator Joe McCarthy actually puts out information that Murrow himself might be a secret communist, and that just gets the snowball rolling in this procedures. Now, this is a wonderfully acted movie that deals with a true life situation. It actually uses actual stock footage from the actual events themselves, from the CBS broadcasts, integrating their own sort of thing. The movie is shot all in black and white to give it a more aesthetic feel of a television program that you'd be watching at the time. Again, a lot of black and white still at the time. And we're dealing with a well-constructed and well-acted procedure. Fantastic cast. Again, just reading the main list is impressive enough, but there's a lot of other just bit parts that are fantastically brought forth with great conviction to their roles. And as it plays out, once the information about Murrow being a quote-unquote secret communist, he's basically told by his higher-ups that he should just let the story with McCartney alone, but he decides to double down and attack him directly on his show, See It Now, which airs on March 9th, 1954, which is about 49 minutes into this hour and 33-minute movie. And when it comes to the Academy Awards that particular year, it got a lot of nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for David Strathairn, Best Original Screenplay, Best Achievement in Art Direction, and Best Cinematography. And as it is the 10th of March, we are going to be dealing with Lost Horizon from 1937, directed by Frank Capra and starring Ronald Colman. I'm definitely aware of Frank Capra and all of his work that he has done for movies, and it's definitely a treat to be seeing a movie that I did not know existed up until this point. Also a version of this movie that is interesting that I saw as a fully restored, or at least close to fully restored version as possible. That being said, this movie does star, like I said, Ronald Colman. It also stars Jane Wyatt, Sam Jeffy, H.B. Warner, Edward Everett Horton, Thomas Mitchell, Margot, Isabel Jewell, and Richard Liu. So to begin with, our lead character of Robert Conway, played by Ronald Coleman, is not only been given the new position of Foreign Secretary for Britain. He is his first task is to basically get foreigners out of Baskal, China, before a warlord's army kills them. In the process of this happening, he and a small band of the last of the survivors take off of a plane that unfortunately has their pilot replaced, and they basically end up getting kidnapped and crash in the Himalayas, and then find themselves in Shangri-La, where people slowly age and health problems are cured and gold is rampant in the hills. And of course, our survivors deal with having to play with the idea of either staying in Shangri-La or leaving, and it comes down to the fact that the temptations to stay or to go just are conflicted in this small little group of survivors. And again, this being a Frank Capra film, we are dealing with a lot of not only really well done acting, which is, this cast is great, very entertaining to watch, but we are also dealing with a lot of really fantastical work when it comes to cinematography and just the production of film at this particular time in history. In the mid 30s, it is kind of cool to see how well they combine all these different sort of elements. There is stock footage being used, miniatures being used, rear screen projection being used, a lot of really cool stunts. At the very beginning of the movie, after the little prologue of the flipping pages of catching you up in the story, we are witness to the actual date of March 10th, 1937, which is about 2 minutes into this one version of an hour and 32 minutes, whereas the restored version that I was able to watch is 2 hours and 12 minutes long, both having the same opening sequence, so the timing still works out to be the same time. Now, the restoration of this movie meant when the movie was originally released in 37, it was an hour and 132 minutes long. It went through subsequent edits and got shortened down to about 92 minutes. Unfortunately, in the intervening time between its original version and its edited down version, those sequences were actually physically lost. There was no longer any trace of those. However, in the early 70s, the AFI went into restoring this movie to its full version when they were actually able to come across just an audio version of the full-length movie minus about 5 to 10 minutes. And whereas the version that I saw as being restored, when it came to sequences where there was no visuals, they would put in photos of the different actors reciting the lines throughout, and that's the version that I saw. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular year, it ended up winning for Best Art Direction and Best Film Editing, and it also got nominated for Best Picture, Best Supporting Actor for H.B. Warner, Best Original Score, Best Sound, and Best Assistant Director. And as it is March 11th, we are going to be watching They Were Expendable from 1945, directed by John Ford and starring Robert Montgomery. Again, we're dealing with a time in history that revolves around the quick production of movies. The movie itself, which was released in 1945, is taking place in a 1942 storyline, and we are dealing with, again, like so many of the movies, we're dealing with the events that happened around the bombing of Pearl Harbor, which obviously at this time of the year, because it is around this time is when that happened, anniversary wise, we're going to be hitting a lot of war centered movies around that those events. Needless to say, I was unaware of this movie, and I guess we're watching another John Wayne flick. And again, like I said, the movie does star Robert Montgomery as well as John Wayne, including Donna Reed, Jack Holt, Ward Bond, Marshall Thompson, and Paul Langton. So the movie deals with a duo of lieutenants, John Brinkley and J.D. Rusty Ryan, which are Robert Montgomery and John Wayne. and they are part of the Navy as they are presenting to the naval forces their new PT boats, which is what we deal with at the very opening of the movie, and how, unfortunately, while they're impressed by the vehicles, they don't really, whereas the day after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the Navy decides to use them as to be couriers instead of actually used for combat assistance. Eventually, the Japanese end up attacking where they're located. They get further pulled into the war. They end up proving how viable their boats are by sinking several enemy vehicles. Along the way, John Wayne gets injured and falls in love with Sandy, who's portrayed by Donna Reed. And the whole entire nurse and patient thing and whatnot that he pulls throughout the rest of the movie, even though we do not get a resolution of her whereabouts by the end of the movie. But it's an interesting story. There's not a lot of romanticism except for, like I said, the brief little patient nurse romance and all that sort of thing we're dealing with. There's really nothing much I can say about any of the other cast, really. I mean, this is definitely Robert Montgomery and John Wayne's picture. We center around them for the most part of almost any sort of sequence. Everyone else that we meet is through passing of scenes with interacting with these two characters to begin with. Very realistic, a lot of really cool pyrotechnics and weapon use and all that sort of thing. We get some really cool a little bit of miniature work, a lot of rear projection, but also a lot of practical in these PT boats are used constantly, and we get to see our actors on these boats being used around, which is kind of cool to see. So once Rusty leaves the hospital, both him and Brinkley leave Bataan with General McCartney on March 11th, 1942, which is about an hour and 12 minutes into this 2 hour and 15-minute movie. And when it came to the Academy Awards for that particular year, it got nominations for Best Visual Effects and Best Sound Recording. All right, so we're going to wrap up this particular episode and look off into the future to see what we're going to be seeing for tomorrow, which is going to be March 12th, and that is going to be The Shawshank Redemption from 1994. So until next time, go see a movie. This has been A Year of Movies, a Planet Geek production. Please be sure to subscribe, download, comment, share, rate, and review. Once again, another thanks to Ivan Walters for his book, A Year of Movies, 365 films to watch on the day they happened. Look for it online or at your local bookstore. Follow Planet Geek Productions on all of our social media. Through Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr, and Letterboxd, search for Planet Geek Productions. On X, former Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky, search for Planet Geek Pod. You can also reach out to us through email at planetgeekpod@gmail.com. Once again, thanks for tuning in, and until next time, go see a movie.